and those individuals that are being harmed. Not only do we give liberty activists something to do all the time instead of just every 2 or 4 years to keep them engaged and to give them wins along the way. Not only do we get the public involved in activism that actually helps people now and not in some distant future when libertarians have taken over, but we also are tying it to the basic premise behind libertarianism. And it's what I call the principle of human respect. When we respect one another as individual human beings, we are happier, we are more harmonious, and we're more prosperous. But when we allow for disrespect to happen, when we allow for coercion, theft, and violence to happen from anyone, we are less harmonious, we are less prosperous, and of course, we're less happy. That is the core of what we do. Now, we're a 501 nonprofit. We aren't tied to political parties or campaigns or any of that. I can give you an example of someone who did use this method in their own special way, who did do it for politics, for electoral politics. It's a man who I would argue is the most successful libertarian candidate in world history, Javier Milei. Now, it remains to be seen how effective he will be at governance. And there are many factors that are involved there. And I will give the benefit of the doubt until we have a doubt for that benefit. But here's what I will say. He's already proven from a campaigning standpoint how this can work. To be clear, Javier Milei did not run saying we need to make marginal changes to this system. He didn't run saying, there's bad people on the left side, and there's good people on the left and good people on the right, and I'm somewhere in the middle here, and we can all work together. He came in saying this entire system is robbing you, it is an act of theft, and we're going to end all of it. He started that. By the time we saw him, he was in full afuera mode. He was in full, he had already got the public on his side, and he was just driving it home and telling people that where they could shove their socialism up in their mother and so forth. Now, some of that's how they talk about things there, but also some of that was he already had the public on his side. He didn't start by telling people to read Rothbard. He ended by telling them to read Rothbard, but he had already gotten them on his side over the last 2 or 3 years in his work as a legislator. Do you know how he did it? Because he tied it to them as individuals. He said, strip away all of the policy and all of the language and the vernacular and rhetoric that they use in trying to explain why this is a good plan. They're stealing from you. And they're putting it in their own pockets and in their pockets of their buddies who put them in office. We're going to end that. Anytime you see one of these new ministries or one of these new programs they're implementing, that's why the price of everything's going up. That's why they had triple-digit inflation. That's why we're in a double-digit recession, a depression they had for many years. He was able to tie it to that because he stripped away all the rhetoric and said, they're robbing you. They're not respecting you. They aren't treating you as a person. They're treating all of you as a collective that they can rob from to benefit themselves. So by the time we are watching him and he's there, with his epic afuera, 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 and ripping all the names of the ministries off the board there, the public, the Argentine public, they weren't looking at that and saying, oh no, what are we going to do without a ministry of sports? Oh no, what are we going to do without a ministry of health? Oh no, my women's studies, how are we going to study women without that? They weren't doing that. What they were doing, when they saw him doing that, they saw the theft being removed because he had already met them where they were. And he had already tied it to what was actually happening. He, in his special way, was selling human respect. Now, maybe he wasn't calling it that, but he was selling the idea behind it. He was distilling it down to, you're not being respected as an individual. You're certainly not being respected as a group. I will respect you. I'm not going to rob you. I'm not going to take from you. I'm not going to do anything to you as a government official that I wouldn't do to you on this side of that podium. That's how we can win. in electoral politics. That's how we can win in our activism. That's how we can win on any front that we work on to spread liberty. If we tie it to respect, that we're already meeting them, instead of arguing with them, we're already talking with them about something that they agree with. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but I will just end on saying, if you lead with respect, respecting people as individuals, and meeting them where they are, I think you'll be surprised how quickly people come around to your side, especially if you don't argue with them. But anyway, so with that, I will take any questions or arguments you have. Thank you. Hey.
Hey, Spike, fill in, you get in the hallway.
Hey,
Thank you for your work. You have an update on that family where their kids are ripped from them in Georgia and they're trying to get them back?
Well, so we're working with multiple families that's happening.
Can you be specific?
Yeah. So I can tell you the first one that we put out was the Hernandez family. And I talked about them yesterday as well, but I'll give a brief rundown of their case. Matt and Tucky Hernandez took their youngest child, at that point just a few month old child, Emma, to a children's hospital because she was crying and had some bruising and swelling. Turned out she had some fractures, which are being caused by a chronic condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, which causes fractures. And the child abuse physician called it abuse. Everyone down the pipeline, the investigating officers, the case workers, the family judge, they actively worked to prevent them from being able to see the medical evidence that Emma had a chronic health condition. They imposed bond conditions on both of the parents in order for them to not be in jail. They had to be estranged from one another indefinitely. They could not speak with or be within however many yards of one another. That went on for the better part of 10 months. And it would have continued to go on if we hadn't found out about it. We got involved. We got thousands of people to contact, all of the officials involved, all the way down that pipeline. And long story short, both Emma and Aria, the older daughter, are now staying with family friends. The parents, Matt and Tucky, are able to see them with no restrictions as often as they want. They just aren't allowed to go home with them. But they, and we are working on that. We are working on getting them home for good and getting the charges dropped. Actually the week before, after nearly a year apart, the judge, partially due to the thousands of angry emails he got, he removed those bond conditions, and after nearly a year apart, Matt and Tucky Hernandez are living together as husband and wife and are able to see their children whenever they want. We are still working on getting their charges dropped. We are still working on getting the family court judge already said when the charges are dropped, my hands are tied until the charges are dropped. Once the charges are dropped, the kids will be back with you. I'll drop this case and you can go back. It'll be like, not like this never happened, but I'll drop the case. By the way, this was a judge who actively refused to allow medical experts to testify about Emma's condition.
Wow.
So that was a total 180. It just happened to happen after thousands of people contacted her, and we started having people with You Are the Power shirt showing up to the hearings to listen in on it. So we are working on that. We're also working because we're finding out not only multiple families in Georgia, but ones in other states as well. We're finding this is basically a child trafficking operation. They're getting federal funds to call every case that gets put in front of them abuse and to rip families apart. And so we are now also working with state legislators and activists across and experts across the country and attorneys across the country. In fact, we're actually getting Rob involved as well. We are working on not just helping the families that are being affected right now, but also creating model legislation to end this at the state level. Because there are some easy things that can be done, like reintroducing due process to child abuse cases instead of letting family courts operate as essentially administrative tribunals without due process. And also eventually, hopefully, working on model legislation at the federal level to modify Title IV funding so that they aren't actively incentivizing calling every case abuse. So we are working on multiple fronts, but for that specific family, they are a lot closer to being back together. They're able to see each other when they want, and the husband and wife live back together again.
Spike, thank you for your work and for getting people together. So,
Any other questions?
I guess a comment and then a question. So the comment is, I think there are many these Facebook groups, fight CPS, that kind of thing. Target rich environment. I don't know if
Behind the
your group has
paywall.
explored it. I know there are thousands of families going through this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we can all only do so much.
Yeah.
So I just offer that to anyone who's interested. It might even be good prospecting, for people here in Utah, just to go on those sites and say, hey, there might be this organization or libertarian party who, might be able to assist you or, look at your situation more favorably than the government folks who are trying to operate your family. The question then is, in the You Are the Power work, I think I'm a member in Utah, but there's a critical mass issue. And I'm just wondering, what kind of numbers do you feel like you need to hit critical mass to where you can be effective? Because we're a small state. We think we punch above our weight, but we are only so big. Where do you think that number is, or is there?
So it's interesting, Rob, that what we're finding is that that's on a cause by cause basis. Because we have a membership of just over 3,000 people that have signed up to be members. And then we have a few thousand more who have signed up just to be on our newsletter and receive regular updates. So we already have several thousand people that are involved. What we find is that, and it is on a cause by cause basis, we've had some causes that literally sending out an email from our team saying, hey, we're about to blow you up to the national scene where you could just back off and not do this, and that's sufficient. We found other ones where having a few hundred people email a handful of officials is enough to back them off. We've seen some where a few thousand is enough to back them off, and we've seen some where with this CPS thing, there's so much money involved, they're digging in their heels. We're able to get small incremental victories for specific families, which is fantastic. But in terms of making actual systemic change on how CPS is done in this example, or how eminent domain abuse is done in other state examples, or automatic release of body cam footage is another thing we're working on. That's a much bigger nut to crack. And I think that is, I'm not sure I can put a specific number behind it. I can just say that the more people that we have involved, the more we're able to do. And so if you would like to be actively involved with what we're doing, I invite you to go to youarethepower.net. And if you haven't already done so, become a member today, because the more people we have that are actively involved in our causes, we watch it happen very quickly. They fight, then they stop fighting. And sometimes they stop fighting very quickly. Sometimes it takes a long time, but it is amazing how quickly they will go from fighting, going to the mattresses against us, to just one day realizing it's not politically expedient anymore for them to continue doing this, and so they back off. So I would invite you to join us. One more thing I will say to that. Justin Amash, I'm not name dropping. Justin Amash once told me, he's a dear friend of mine, and we were, as dear friends, we were hanging out. But he, but I'm not name dropping, I just want to be clear. Justin Amash told me when he was in Congress, he said, he gave a specific number. When my fellow reps get this specific number of emails, that's enough for them to have their team look into it and possibly take action on it. What do you think that number is?
100.
6,000.
27.
Who said 6? Did I already tell you this?
No.
Okay, 6. US Congress, not state rep, not city council, Congress. If they get 6 emails about something, it's enough for them to look into it. If they get 100 emails, depending on the issue, it might be enough for them to change their mind on it or to make up their mind on it.
Right.
Ukraine funding isn't going to change with 100 emails, but some of these other issues, especially if they're things that affect us at the state level, it's enough to change a congressperson's mind. You would be shocked at how underengaged many of these reps are, because we just assume that, they're not going to do anything. And at the state level, it's even more so. They'll change their minds for 20 emails, and they'll look at it if they get 1 email. They desperately, not all of them, many of them desperately want to know what their constituents think. It doesn't take much. Thank you for that.
Can we get a recount of how many people are in the room so we know how many emails we can send and how many policies we can check?
Please stand for 5 minutes. Yeah, there's a few sixes in here. I know that. I think we can split each one of you to take on a certain number of conversations.